Welcome to the IT Fundamentals Training Series. This is episode 20, and we're in chapter 2 today, and we're going to talk about peripherals and connectors, how to get those things attached to your computer. Here we go. Welcome back to the IT Fundamentals Training Series. This is Mark Alp. Today we are in chapter 2, page we're going to look at page 65 and onward to page 68 is where we're at in these items. And we're going to be talking about peripherals. Now, this is going to be a fairly quick item because we are not going to talk about how to connect these. That comes, especially when it comes to monitors or CRTs. We'll talk about that in episode 21. But right now, we're just going to talk about peripherals in general. So let's get a little bit of an idea. Peripherals are any type of device that you attach to your computer, typically externally. It's an add-on, if you will. So if you think of it this way, you go to McDonald's and they say you want fries with that. Think of peripherals as the fries. You get your hamburger, you get your quarter pounder or whatever, and then they want to add on the Coke and the fries. Well, that's kind of what we're talking about here with the computers. We need to add things on. And ask our question, why would we add things on? Most computers today come with everything that you need: a good video card, a good audio card, a network interface card, even wireless interface for the network, all those types of things. But why would we need to add on a peripheral? Typically, the reason you would need to add on a peripheral is for items that you want to upgrade. So, for example, if you are doing recording of sound of your instruments, for example, if you're a musician and you want to do better recording of your sound, you might add a better peripheral for the microphone or even the sound card itself. If you're doing heavy gaming, you might want to add a hard drive for data storage of the game content, or you may want to add even if you're doing old time gaming, you want to add a joystick, or if you're doing flight simulators like with Digital Combat Flight Simulator or DCS, you might want to add throttles and rudder pedals and all sorts of other pieces to it that enhance it. So those are all the peripherals that you would add. Now, historically speaking, the peripherals that you would add to the computer were even more. You had to have a wired connection between your printer and your computer, for example. And now we do wireless across the network. So you don't necessarily need to add a printer as a peripheral where it's directly attached to your computer. We used to have, simple things like even disk drives or optical drives would be added as peripherals later on. You don't need to do that anymore. So if you're going to understand the common peripherals and their interfaces, that's the kind of concept you need to look at is you're adding fries, you're adding pieces to the computer. So the book talks about some very simple peripherals that they would recommend that you add or that are going to be discussed in regarding to adding these. And one of them they really focus on, or the two that they really focus on here, are display devices or monitors and audio and video devices. And typically when you're adding audio devices, which is where they focus on in the book, they're talking about how to integrate with gaming or the musician type of scenario where you're splitting the tracks, you're splitting the sound signals and so on and so forth out into separate channels so that you can have higher quality. And that's really the purpose of adding things like the audio connector. So it goes into some detail and even has a figure 2.2 of a sound card and game port on there, which is actually very old. And that game port is used for a joystick type of environment rather than what we use now. Typically, everything is plugged in through USB. Like this microphone and this camera that I'm using are USB add-ons to my computer. Those are considered peripherals. So you can see in figure 2.1 of 2.2 that each of these cards, one is built in on 2.1 and one is an add-on on 2.2. They have different holes, if you will, or female inputs for the types of devices. You'll notice in 2.1 that they have an input and an output for the audio, and that's the sound portion of it. So you're splitting, if you will, the input and the output for the sound. And then you also have a microphone jack on there, and it's very similar in 2.2. The difference being that in 2.1 you could actually see they identify which those are. Now each of those are different colors, and here's what you need to understand with these is that you don't need to memorize this, just need to have in the back of your head that the plugs are usually 1/8 inch plugs or 3.5 millimeter plugs that go into these female adapters. Also understand that the coloring system on here, if you're looking at the bottom of the wording portion, just on page 66, just above figure 2.1, it talks about this. It says, the system also gives you a handy icon next to each plug. We see that in the item, letting you know which one is for audio input and which one is for speakers. It's usually green. And which one is for the microphone, which is usually pink. Green is for speakers, and pink is still for the microphone. So just kind of keep that in mind. Is green is for the green is for the speakers. So that's something that you're hearing, and pink is for the input of the microphone. So those are the things that you need to take a look at and understand there. The next thing I would take a look at is just put it in the back of your head what a DA15 connector is. And that DA15 connector is what they call the gain port, and it's for the older style joysticks. Very likely you'll never see that, or very rare that you'll see that, but for the testing purposes, have that in the back of your head. Now let's move on to the other big peripheral that they talk about here, which is the display devices and connectors. Those are a big fancy term for monitors. Well, the reason that they call it display devices because at the bottom of page 67 and the beginning of page 68, this is kind of what you need to focus on here, is understanding CRTs, projectors, flat screens, and touch screens, because people get those confused or just generally call them a monitor. So let's go through each of those real quickly and identify what they do and why they're different. So CRT is a cathode ray tube. It's the old-fashioned television style monitor that has a very long back end. It's big and bulky, typically connects to your computer through a VGA cable, not any sort of digital connection. If you have one of these or you see one of these, I would be shocked in modern environments and modern times. In fact, just recently I was working as a consultant for an organization, and there were some CRTs still left on the shelf, and I said, I get rid of those. We're never going to use them. The second thing with CRTs that you need to understand, another reason to get rid of them, is because technically from a landfill perspective, environmental, or what we call ESG, environmental social governance, and an environmental perspective, the CRTs are very hard to recycle and also have dangerous chemicals inside of them. So you really kind of want to get them out of your house and get them, just get them away from you or your business if you don't have them, or if you have them already. So the next thing that's on the list is projectors. Exactly what it says. It's a projector. Typically, again, old style projectors would connect through VGA, but the newer ones are USB. Those are the ones you're going to see in large hotel ballrooms, in churches, inside of a large conference room type of scenario where they're projecting things up on the screen. Now, projectors are still very valuable and very important, especially in order to create a very large, big screen type of environment. But if you're in a classroom type of setting, it's probably better to move away from projectors and move into more of a television or monitor type of scenario, simply because they are brighter and their colors are more vivid inside of a monitor or television type of scenario. But projectors actually take the image and they project it up onto a wall, up onto a sheet, if that's what you want to do, wherever you want to put it, they project it up onto there. All right, flat screens are what we typically have. It's what I have in front of me. I've got 3 flat screens in front of me right now. Basically, these are the LCD type of screens, although liquid crystal display LCD is not what they currently have anymore. But the flat screens are the ones that have really replaced all of the CRTs out there. Now, with flat screens, you can use a television because you can connect your computer into the HDMI 1 port or each HDMI 2 port on that television. So you can go to Walmart, you can go to Best Buy, someplace like that, and buy a 27-inch TV and put that one up as your monitor, and it would work perfectly fine. Whereas the old style things, that wouldn't happen. Touch screens are basically flat screens that you can touch and use the screen as a monitor. As a mouse. Anything you touch, the mouse will move, and you can select links on that, so on and so forth. So it has built-in technologies that allow for your finger to act as the touch. Now, you also, of course, have touch screens on your cell phones and on your iPads and things along those lines. And your Google devices and your Android devices and whatever they may be. So touchscreens are very common these days, although they are not common with a large screen format, because they start to get rather expensive when you do touchscreen in large screen format. So if you have a desktop or a tower type of computer, you're typically not going to have a touchscreen type of environment. Where if you get smaller into a tablet or a laptop type of scenario, you very well may have a touchscreen. And once you get used to the touchscreen and you get used to moving your hand away from the mouse and actually doing the touch, you'll find that it's actually much easier. And if you use a computer like a laptop on an airplane, for example, it's much easier to move around with that than it is with a mouse. All right, one thing I want to go back to and really kind of focus your attention on page 68 regarding the CRT monitors. They spend a lot of time on this, and I wanted to wait until the end to talk about these CRT monitors because they spend time on here. Of course, that means you need to worry about it on the test, but the information that you're going to learn is probably not going to be useful in your career other than history-wise. So what I want you to do is I want you to go ahead and read through page 68, where it starts with CRTs, until the end of that on page 69. What you need to focus on there from a testing perspective is the section about dot pitch. So CRTs are usually dot matrix type of or digital, just little digital dots that come together to form that image, rather than a more digital image that you see on a flat screen that gives you the clearer resolution and the clearer, the more vibrant picture. And that's because of the dot pitch. So take a look at dot pitch on there and kind of understand that. Also take a look at resolution. That seems to be an important piece. So these pixels, if you will, these little dots that I was talking about, the pixels are something and that you need to pay attention to, and just understand that pixels are those little dots in there that create the image. There's in one set, there's 1024 across and 768 pixels down. That's how you get your resolution of 1024 by 768. When we go to that 4K level, we're looking at, if we were to use pixels, we're using some pretty high density pixel type of scenarios. All right. That's what I want you to learn and understand for peripherals and connectors. On episode 21 tomorrow, we'll start looking at the video connectors. The video connectors will be an important piece for you to keep in mind as you go through the testing, because even in the digital side of things, there's multiple types of digital connectors. There's HDMI, there's even USB, DVI, VGA, so on and so forth. So we'll take a little bit deeper dive on that one in addressing the connectors here very shortly. All right. Again, as usual, like and subscribe to our podcast, to our video here on YouTube or wherever you're getting the results of this production. I really, again, want you to provide questions. You can do that right here as my email address, mhaupt@commonsensesecurity.net. I look forward to having communication with you. I know there's some new people that are joining on with us. So, hey, glad to have you join on, catch up, and hopefully if you have questions, if you're trying to scramble to catch up, just send me an email and we can take a step back and take a look at a few things, or I can point you to the right spot in the podcast. All right. For today, episode 20 is in the books. Thank you very much.